The envelope was already open when I found it. It was sitting on the kitchen counter. Face down. Like someone had tried to hide it, but ran out of time. I didn't touch it. I just stood there. The return address was from a law firm I didn't recognize. Our family's name was printed on the front, but not my name. Not my parents' names either. My sister's name. I set my bag down slowly. I walked to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed and I stared at the wall for a long time. She hadn't mentioned any lawyers. She hadn't mentioned anything. That's when I realized something was very wrong. Let me tell you a little about who I am, so you understand why I didn't panic. I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions. I've always been the steady one. The quiet one. Growing up, my sister was the center of attention, louder, more emotional, the one who made things happen in a room. I was the one in the background, watching, taking notes in my head. That habit saved me later. But I didn't know that yet. At the time, I was 31. Living in the same house as my parents, a temporary arrangement after a job transition that had stretched longer than anyone planned. My sister, Maya, lived 40 minutes away with her husband. Or the man we were told was her husband. They'd had a small ceremony 2 years earlier. Quick. Private. Just the way we want it, she'd said. No formal reception. No photographer. No license shown to anyone. We assumed it was filed. We assumed a lot of things. My parents adored him. He was charming, well-dressed, spoke carefully. He had opinions about everything and delivered them like facts. My father especially trusted him. Within 6 months of that ceremony, he was helping manage some of the family finances. Small things at first. Bill payments. A shared account. Then my father's health declined. Nothing sudden. A slow fade. His memory started slipping. He'd repeat himself. He'd forget conversations. He'd sign things and not remember signing them. My mother was overwhelmed. Maya and her husband stepped in to help. That's what we were told. That's what we believed. I moved back in to help my mother. And that's when I started noticing things. Small things. The kind you dismiss the first time. The second time, you file away. The third time, you pay attention. A bank statement left out, then quickly moved. A phone call my mother ended the moment I walked into the room. A new car in my sister's driveway that she laughed off when I asked about it. We got a good deal, she said. Her husband didn't meet my eyes when he said hello anymore. I mentioned it once to my mother. Gently. I said I thought something felt off with the accounts. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You've always been jealous of your sister." I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I'd learned a long time ago that arguing gets you nowhere when someone has already decided what the truth is. But that word stayed with me. Jealous. I wasn't jealous. I was concerned. And there's a difference, but only one of us in that conversation was interested in finding it. I went back to my room that night and I thought about the envelope. I thought about the lawyer's address. I thought about the car, the account statements, the phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms. I thought about my father, who used to balance his own checkbook every Sunday morning at the kitchen table, who now couldn't remember what day it was. I decided then that I wasn't going to say anything else out loud. No more questions. No more, something feels off. No more giving anyone the chance to call me jealous again. So I stopped reacting. And I started watching. The first thing I did was get organized. I bought a small notebook. Nothing special. I kept it in my coat pocket. Every time I noticed something, a date, an amount, a name, a conversation I overheard, I wrote it down. Time. Place. Exactly what was said or seen. No interpretation. Just facts. Within 3 weeks, the notebook had 12 pages. It started with the mail. I began paying attention to what arrived and when. Most of it was ordinary. But once a week, sometimes twice, there were envelopes from financial institutions, banks, an investment firm, a pension administrator. They were always addressed to my father. And they were always opened before I ever saw them. I didn't touch anything. I just noted the return addresses. Then I got access to something I wasn't supposed to see. My mother asked me to help her find a document, an old insurance policy from years back. She pointed me toward a filing cabinet in my father's office. I was going through the folders when I found a manila envelope tucked behind the hanging files at the very back. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't sealed. Inside were 4 documents. The first was a power of attorney. Signed by my father. Dated 14 months ago. It granted full financial and legal authority to my sister's husband. My father's signature was at the bottom. I looked at it for a long time. I knew his handwriting. I had birthday cards from him going back 20 years. The signature didn't look right. The second document was a transfer authorization from my father's retirement account. $42,000. Moved in 3 separate transactions over 6 months. The receiving account wasn't a family account I recognized. The third was a loan agreement. My parents' home listed as collateral. Signed by my father. Same date as the power of attorney. The fourth stopped me completely. It was a marriage certificate. My sister's name was on it. But the name next to hers wasn't the man I'd been introduced to as her husband for 2 years. It was a different name entirely. Same photograph attached. I recognized his face, but a completely different legal identity. I stood in that office for a long time without moving. I didn't take anything. I didn't photograph anything yet. I put everything back exactly as I found it and I walked out, and I made my mother some tea, and I sat across from her and I asked her how she was feeling, and she said tired, and I said I know, and we sat there quietly. Inside, I was doing math. $42,000 gone. A fraudulent power of attorney. A home used as collateral without my mother's knowledge. I was certain of that now, based on her face every time money was mentioned. And a man living in our family's trust under a name that wasn't his. I went back 2 days later. This time with my phone. I photographed every document. Slowly. Clearly. I noted the account numbers, the dates, the institutional names. I photographed the marriage certificate twice, once for the name, once for the document number in the corner. Then I did something that felt strange, but necessary. I sat in the car outside the house, and I sent every image to 2 email addresses. One was mine. One was a cloud account I'd created the week before that no one knew about. That night, I searched the second name on the marriage certificate. It took less than an hour. There was a civil case in another state. Filed 3 years ago. A woman, a family, a very similar story. Financial control gained slowly. An elderly parent. A forged signature. The case had been settled quietly. His name, his real name, was in the court record. He had done this before. I closed my laptop. I sat in the dark for a while. I thought about going straight to my mother. I thought about calling my sister. I thought about walking into the house and putting every document on the kitchen table. Confronting them would have ruined everything. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an investigator. I'm not someone with connections or resources or any particular advantage. I'm just someone who grew up watching carefully and learned that the quietest move is usually the strongest one. So I thought about what I actually had. I had photographs of documents. I had a name that didn't match. I had a court record from another state. I had 12 pages of dated observations in a small notebook. And I had something else, something I hadn't fully appreciated yet. I had time. They didn't know I was looking. As far as anyone in that house was concerned, I was just the quiet one. The background one. The jealous sister. That was their mistake. The first call I made was to a legal aid clinic in the city. I didn't want to spend money I didn't have on a consultation before I knew what I was dealing with. I explained the situation in broad terms to the intake coordinator, elderly parent, possible forged signatures, financial transfers, fraudulent identity. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You need to speak with an elder law attorney. Today if possible." I had an appointment by the end of the week. The attorney's name was a woman in her 50s. Unhurried. She listened without interrupting. I laid everything out on her desk, the photographs printed clearly, the notebook, the court record I'd found printed from the public filing. She looked through each item slowly. When she got to the marriage certificate with the second name, she looked up at me. "How long has this person had power of attorney?" she asked. I told her 14 months. She wrote something down. She asked about my father's diagnosis. I told her it hadn't been formally assessed yet, that his memory decline had been gradual, and no one had initiated an evaluation. She wrote that down too. Then she told me what we needed to do. And in what order. First, my father needed a formal cognitive assessment. Not to weaponize it. To establish the timeline. If his capacity was already compromised when the power of attorney was signed, the document could be challenged. The signature irregularity I'd noticed gave us additional grounds. Second, the financial institutions needed to be contacted with a formal fraud notification. Not a phone call. A written legal notice, sent by her office, triggering an automatic hold and review process on the accounts. Third, the second identity needed to go to law enforcement. Not local. She recommended the state's financial crimes unit. They had jurisdiction, and given the prior civil case in another state, this could constitute a pattern. She told me one more thing before I left. She said, "Don't change your behavior at home. Don't give them any indication anything is happening. Go back and be exactly who they think you are." I nodded. I drove home. I made dinner. My sister and her husband came over that evening. They visited often now. I understood why, and I set the table and I asked him if he wanted more water, and I watched him lean back in his chair at my father's table with the ease of someone who believed they had already won. My father sat quietly at the head of the table. He smiled when someone made a joke. He didn't always follow the conversation. But he was there. And I looked at him and I thought, I see you. And I'm not going to let this continue. Over the next 11 days, things moved quietly and quickly. My father's doctor arranged a cognitive evaluation. The results were grim but useful, moderate decline consistent with early-stage dementia, onset estimated at least 18 months prior. The attorney filed an emergency petition to have the power of attorney reviewed and suspended pending investigation. The financial institutions were notified. 2 of the 3 accounts were frozen within 72 hours. The elder law attorney connected with the financial crimes unit. They had questions. I answered them. I handed over everything, originals photographed and copies secured in 3 locations. The prior civil case from the other state was already in their system under a flag I hadn't known about. He was already on a watch list. On the 12th day, the attorney called me. She told me the financial crimes unit was ready to move. They wanted to do it at the house, a controlled environment, my parents present, everything documented. They asked if I could make sure my sister and her husband would be there the following morning. I texted my sister that evening. I told her mom was having a hard day, and it would mean a lot if she came by in the morning. I told her to bring him. She replied within minutes. A heart emoji. Of course. We'll be there by 10. I put my phone down. I made sure the house was clean. I made sure there was coffee ready. I made sure my father was comfortable in his chair by the window where he liked to sit in the morning light. And then I went to bed. They thought it was just another day. It wasn't. They arrived at 10:04. My sister came in first, the way she always did, moving quickly, filling the space, kissing my mother on the cheek, asking about breakfast. He followed behind her. Jacket on. Calm. He nodded at me the way he always did and moved toward the kitchen counter like he owned the floor beneath him. He probably thought he did. I had made coffee. I poured 2 cups without being asked. I set them on the table. I sat down across from my mother and I kept my hands still. 4 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. 2 investigators from the State Financial Crimes Unit stood on the porch. Plainclothes. Quiet. Behind them, slightly to the left, was my attorney. She had asked to be present. They had agreed. There was also a social worker from Adult Protective Services. That had been the attorney's addition, to ensure my parents were supported through whatever happened next. Nobody announced anything dramatically. There were no raised voices. One of the investigators simply asked if they could come in. I stepped aside. My sister turned around from the kitchen counter. She saw the attorney first. I watched her face move through several expressions in less than 2 seconds. Confusion. Recognition. Something else. She looked at me. I looked back at her and I didn't say anything. He was slower to react. He turned from the window and saw the investigators, and for just a moment, a very brief moment, his composure slipped. It was small. A tightening around the eyes. A stillness that replaced the ease he'd carried all morning. Then he smiled. Measured. Practiced. Can I help you? He said. One of the investigators introduced themselves. They asked him to sit down. They asked my sister to sit down. They asked my mother, gently, if she would be comfortable remaining in the room. The social worker moved to sit beside her. My mother looked at me. I nodded once. She stayed. My father was in his chair by the window. He watched quietly. He didn't fully understand what was happening. But he looked peaceful. The morning light was on his face. What followed was not dramatic. That's the part people don't expect when they imagine moments like this. There was no shouting. No confession. No collapse. The investigators spoke in even, professional tones. They laid out what they had. The fraudulent power of attorney. The irregular signatures. The 3 financial transfers, totaling just over $42,000. The marriage certificate bearing a different legal name. When they said the second name out loud, his real name, my sister went very still. She turned to look at him slowly. He didn't look back at her. I don't know what she knew. I still don't. That question belongs to her and whatever comes next in her life. But I watched her face in that moment, and what I saw there wasn't the expression of someone hearing a lie exposed. It was more complicated than that. And quieter. He was taken in for formal questioning. Not arrested in that moment, the investigators were careful and procedural, but he left the house with them and he did not come back. Later that week he was charged. Financial elder abuse. Identity fraud. The prior case in the other state was reopened. His actual name, it turned out, had 3 flags across 2 states. The civil settlement from before had included a confidentiality clause, which is why it had been so easy for him to do it again. The power of attorney was nullified. The petition my attorney had filed moved quickly once the fraud finding was confirmed. The frozen accounts were reviewed. Some of the money was gone, spent, moved, converted. But not all of it. The financial institutions, once the legal fraud notice was filed, had liability exposure of their own. Negotiations began. My parents' home was safe. The loan collateral was tied to a document now voided. That took several months to fully resolve. But it resolved. My sister cooperated with investigators. I don't know all the details of what she told them, or what she knew, or when she knew it. That's not mine to carry. What I know is that she called me 3 months later, and we spoke for a long time. It wasn't easy. Neither of us cried. We spoke carefully, like 2 people rebuilding something that had been damaged, but not destroyed. I don't know yet what we are to each other now. I think we're still finding out. My father had a good stretch of weeks after everything settled. More present. Lighter somehow, though he couldn't have told you why. We played cards a few times at the kitchen table, him and me, the way we used to when I was small. He won most of the hands. He always had. My mother stopped flinching when the mail arrived. I kept the notebook. I don't know why. I don't look at it. But I know where it is. There's a version of this story where I walked into that kitchen and screamed. Where I threw documents on the table and demanded answers and made everyone cry and proved every assumption they'd ever had about me, the jealous one, the difficult one, the one who always had to make things complicated. I'm glad that's not the version that happened. Because the version that happened protected my father. It recovered what could be recovered. It gave my mother her home back. It stopped him from doing it to another family. That's what it was always about. Not being right. Not making them sorry. Just stopping it. Fixing what could be fixed. Protecting the people who couldn't protect themselves. Some nights I sit in the kitchen after everyone's asleep. I make tea. I listen to the house settle around me. No envelopes left face down on the counter. No phone calls that stop when I walk in. No careful smiles from a man who was counting what wasn't his. Just the refrigerator hum. The clock. The particular silence of a house where everyone inside it is finally safe. That night, everything was quiet.